欢迎大家来到羊兄咖啡店，就让我来带大家一起去聊时事吧。Hello， 大家好，欢迎大家又回到羊兄饮茶啦。这段期间呢，真的是很不好意思，因为羊兄其实是蛮不舒服的，但是现在已经康复了。因为这一次羊兄来到一个非常特别的地方，也就是马来西亚世界银行的代表处啊，非常的感激我们的马来西亚世界银行的总代表，也就是松田康彦先生呢，他去接受了羊兄的这个采访呢。今天我就信誓旦旦的非常开心来到了这个世界银行的代表处啦。究竟他能够跟我们分享些什么呢？大家又是否了解关于世界银行的运作呢？先请大家就跟我们一起走进世界银行的这一个环境来了解吧。但是在我开始之前呢，请不要吝啬啦，就给羊兄一个点赞、订阅还有分享出去，因为你们大家支持才是我们频道继续坚持下去的动力哦，好不好？就花你3秒钟就做就好了，1、2、3 ，OK， 走 ，Let's go。这一次呢，我们非常荣幸能够请到马来西亚的世界银行总代表，也是马来西亚的这个国家经理 Country Manager Mr. Yasuhiko Masuda。Thank you for accepting the interview。然后我们就直接进入今天的访谈重点吧。Right, Mr. Yasu, thank you for accepting the interview once again. So, because I think a lot of audience in front of the camera are quite curious, especially Malaysians, about what is World Bank and what is its mission. Could you share with our audience more about what is World Bank and its history or its role in maybe in Malaysia or in the world?
Okay, well, Tan, thank you very much for the invitation.
My pleasure.
And welcome to the World Bank office here in KL. I actually accepted this request partly because of this question. So thank you for starting with that.
Thank you so much.
A lot of people here in Malaysia don't know what the World Bank does, what the World Bank is, and it's a good thing because typically countries where economies have done well, people don't know about the World Bank all that much. If you went to poorer countries, most of our offices are in poorer countries in the world.
Okay.
You go to next door to the Philippines, you ask people about the World Bank, they have a better sense.
Okay.
Because they are maybe a bit more dependent on the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other international institutions than countries like Malaysia. So I meet people on the ground, on the street and on the golf course and so on. And then they discover I work for the World Bank.
Yeah.
And then some of them...
Must be very cool, right?
Well, yeah, they start asking, tell me, where the exchange rate is going to go tomorrow. They start asking about, loans and stuff. And it's the same with my friends in Japan. They also don't know.
Okay.
So now what are we? So we are an international organization whose mission is to help countries reduce poverty.
Reduce poverty.
So our main mission is poverty reduction.
Okay.
And currently, our mission is being debated for some adjustments because of climate change and other priorities coming up. But at the moment, the official missions are eradicating extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity.
Shared prosperity.
So shared prosperity, in practical terms, means working to reduce inequality.
Equity.
While promoting growth of the economy.
Right.
So raise everybody together.
Right. So could you just tell our audience more about what kind of works that the World Bank do, right, in Malaysia specifically?
Yeah. So the World Bank is a bank. So our primary way of working is providing financing for development purposes.
Okay.
The World Bank only lends to sovereign countries, to governments. We do not lend to people or private companies. We have a branch called International Finance Corporation, which is a sort of a subsidiary or part of the World Bank, which only works with the private sector in developing countries.
Right.
So their mission is to provide lending, equity financing, and so on, as well as advisory for private companies in developing countries as part of the larger development strategy. The World Bank proper provides technical assistance, lending for development projects. We will finance, Malaysia used to borrow from the World Bank until the 90s.
Okay.
So we used to finance the FELDA projects, for example.
The FELDA projects.
Education, health, infrastructure, roads.
World Bank plays a role as well.
Yes. World Bank financed even development projects in Japan in the 50s and 60s. So we have this famous bullet train. It was partly financed by the World Bank.
Oh.
So that's what we do, and the reason is because the World Bank was established in 1944.
That's quite some time ago.
As the World War II was coming to an end, U.S., U.K., and countries that were coming out victorious met and decided that Europe needed financing for reconstruction after the war.
Yes.
So that's how it started. And then, the rest is history. We did that. Europe was reconstructed. We realized developing countries needed help. So then the mission shifted to helping developing countries develop. And we've been at it since 1944. What we do in Malaysia, right?
Okay,
I just gave you all the background of what the World Bank, historically and so on. Here in Malaysia, we don't do lending. We don't do financing. I hinted at it by saying, Malaysia used to borrow until the 90s. So what we do now is we provide policy advice. So
to the government?
Yes.
Right.
And so you may hear about, reports that we produce and launch and so on. And, so we work with the Ministry of Finance, Bank Negara, Ministry of Economy, and a number of other ministries. As requested, we do analysis, prepare reports, and sometimes we provide advice sort of in confidence without public knowledge, because sometimes we use data that are not publicly available, right? And other times, we do public things, the reports that we publish or conferences that we organize with public participation. Individual stuff like myself and other colleagues participate in events and conferences that others organize. And so, for example, next month is it? Youth Economic Forum.
On YEF.
Yeah.
Right. Organized by the Perdana Fellow Alumni Association. Right.
So some of us are invited as panelist speakers, and then we go and share what we know about the topic. So those are the variety of ways in which we contribute to economic development here in Malaysia.
Sounds like, so World Bank has a lot of involvement, especially with the public stakeholders. Could you just share with us about more specific projects that you guys are working on right now in Malaysia, including those if you're working with the government or you're working with different stakeholders as well? Is there any specific projects at the moment?
We always work with the government. So let's see. And then sometimes we do, as I said, things because the government specifically requests some support. Other times, under a broad agreement that we have with the Ministry of Finance in particular, we pick a topic ourselves, and prepare a report. So the most perhaps well-known ones is called Malaysia Economic Monitor.
Okay.
So we publish this, it's an economic report that we publish every 6 months. The next one's coming up
every 6 months
in mid-October. We're going to be launching the next one in mid-October.
Very soon, I suppose.
Yes. And it covers the contemporary analysis of the macroeconomic situation
in Malaysia.
Malaysia growth projection and inflation, things like that, as well as a special topic. So the last one we published was in February, and it was about digital economy.
Digital economy.
So we had a dedicated, half of the report on how Malaysia could further its digitalization of the economy in different aspects.
Right. So
everyone has a special topic. Each time it's different.
It looks like you have different teams of people working on different topics, right?
Correct.
Right. So let's talk about, since you are talking about the Malaysian economy, could you just share with us about your analysis of our current economy?
So Malaysia, the big story is that Malaysia is one of the most successful economies among the developing countries, historically speaking. Right?
Okay.
That's why it's almost at the point of becoming high-income economy by the way we do the classification from the World Bank. Yeah.
Okay.
But at the same time, the momentum of economic growth in Malaysia has slowed down over the last decade or so.
Yes.
So, more of the challenges are visible than the successes of the past, So, for example, cost of living.
Yes,
it's
a serious
big
problem
issue,
right now.
And people complaining about inflation.
Yes.
We ourselves noticed, some things are more expensive than a year or two ago.
Yes.
So inflation is definitely an issue, but compared to many other countries, the inflation level in Malaysia has been relatively more
moderate,
control, right?
More control.
Moderate because actually the government is controlling some of the things through subsidies and price controls and so on. But I think the issue is real. And in my view, the issue is less on the side of the prices of things. I mean, they are important, but than on the side of the wage.
Right.
So the wage
stagnation
has not grown as fast. This, to me, was a surprise, actually, when I came here 2 years ago. And I thought Malaysia, thriving economy. I land in KL. And
Yes.
you see all these, high buildings and developing infrastructure. It took me a while to understand this, the wage stagnation and the related problems that the people are feeling.
Yes.
And I think that's the real challenge for Malaysia. Yeah.
So when you talk about wage, it's not going up, right? In par with like economic growth. Could you just share with us like what can the World Bank do if, or what's your recommendations to the Malaysian government, I suppose, if they want to tackle this issue?
So it's not that simple. It's like one or two recommendations, you can fix it. I actually think that the government knows about the issue quite well. There might be some specific points where reasonable economists may not fully in agreement on. But overall, I think they know the issues. They know that stagnant wage is an issue, and then people talk about it, right? Government people come out and talk about these things. One of the more intractable challenges that I think the country needs to address is the quality of education.
Quality of education?
Yeah.
Okay.
That relates to the quality of the graduates, their employability, vis-a-vis the fast evolving, more and more technologically advanced economy, and the companies that are looking for talents, So I think that is one of the most difficult things to fix, but one of the most important things to fix for Malaysia. I think it relates to this point about the quality of education. My perception is that the talent problem is the biggest challenge for Malaysia today.
Talents are flowing out of the country?
That's one.
Okay.
But
Quality.
also, and partly as a result, of the inadequacy of the education system, or the inability of the education system to adjust to the changing requirements of the economy. Because Malaysian education system also did relatively well compared to many other countries, historically speaking. Your level of education is high, and so it's not a question of people having education. It's more about what it is that they're learning, and whether they're learning skills that the modern economy requires. Many countries are grappling with this problem, and Malaysia is one too.
Indeed.
Right? But anyway, as a result of these things, you don't have enough qualified engineers, computer scientists, data analysts, and so on. And when companies are looking for new places to invest, right, a lot of companies are now moving out of China, for example, for international political reasons.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not all coming to Malaysia. Some are coming, but some are not going elsewhere.
Neighboring countries.
Right? And if Malaysia had a stronger pool of strong talents, many more will be coming here. I think there aren't that many short-term solutions. So if some deep reform had happened 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Right? Then maybe we would be facing less of this problem. I mean, we never know, because well-intentioned reforms do not always produce the intended results.
Right.
It's difficult to get everything right.
Correct.
Especially in something like education. But, and as a result, we feel like, it's urgent, we have to do something now. Education reform takes a generation. We don't have time for it. If you keep doing that, then another generation passes, right?
Right.
So somewhere I think it needs to start. So that's one. It will not solve today's problem. Yeah, because if you are improving education, you start at preschool. So while we're talking about four-year-old, 5-year-olds, at least 20 years or so before they can become
long road
engineers, right? Or whatever the society requires. And it's not only engineers, you need a full range of skills, including, areas outside STEM. It's not only about STEM, but, Anyway, so that's one that, somebody needs to start sooner than later so that the next generation can benefit from it. Otherwise, I don't know, it's a controversial point, but I happen to think that more flexible approach to attracting foreign talents may be a way. If companies are coming in and saying we need talent, we would invest in Malaysia if we had X number of this kind of engineers. But we're not coming because we're not sure if Malaysia can supply that. Hopefully many of those will be Malaysians themselves, maybe coming back from Singapore or other places. But some of the others might have to be well-educated Indians or some others who can come in and fill the gap. Right? So that flexibility might be the necessary step in the immediate short run.
So to make it more like to allow the government to maybe lenient a bit the criteria for accepting foreign talents to come into our country. Right. So are you optimistic about all these changes could take place about in the Malaysian economy?
Guardedly, so the World Bank has been involved in a small way, in various aspects of government policy making, and one of the interesting recent announcements is this new industrial master plan.
Yeah, yes. The Prime Minister has just launched it.
Yeah, last month. It's a good document. It's a good plan. It's well thought through. If the government can implement many of the ideas in it, I'm sure that good things will happen. Again, it's I think less about whether or not the government has good policies. Yeah, I mean they do have a lot of good policies already, I think, and so that gives us optimism. Question is how much of that can and will be implemented. It's an old topic of implementation challenges. We'll see. That's the proof of the pudding, so to speak.
Right.
But there's enough to and trust me, there are governments that are lost in directions, right? Or there are governments that have policies that, at least from the World Bank or other perspectives, are questionable. Here in the areas of economic policy, by and large, that's not the problem.
So it's not as bad as we imagine.
Malaysia is fine.
It's fine.
Malaysian people complain of things, understandably, because the aspiration is understandably and appropriately higher. But we come from working in much poorer countries, and then we land here and compare Malaysia. Yes, there are challenges, but it's not that bad.
There are still hopes that we can resolve all the problems.
The country has accomplished a lot, and you have a strong pool of people. Not everybody is staying here. That's one of the issues for sure. But enough people are staying here. So if you find a way of allocating, that's not a good way to. It doesn't sound good of allocating people.
Managing the
labor economy, labor market could allocate these talents, in where they're needed. But including from outside, if and where needed, I think you can go far still.
Right. Talking about your background as well, because you just mentioned that you're coming, so you used to work in different poorer countries and developing countries, and you say that Malaysia is not that bad. So with regards to your experience, I'm quite curious about your background, because when I read about your profile and you started working in the World Bank ever since 20 years plus years ago, and you used to work in Latin American country, Caribbean country, and you have a lot of experiences. Could you just share with our audience about what keeps you in this organization for so long?
So most people assume I'm an economist because I work for the World Bank and I'm the head of the World Bank office. I am not an economist. I'm a political scientist by training.
Okay.
So I did PhD in political science, thinking, okay, I'll become a university professor.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then
that's what many people thought about as well.
Especially if you do PhD,
Yes,
in a discipline like political science, which is not very useful in society other than teaching.
Used to be.
Yeah. Some political scientist colleagues will dispute with me, so maybe it's just me speaking.
Right.
And then I was even going around giving lectures. This was in Venezuela, criticizing the World Bank.
Oh.
Yeah.
Spicy.
But based on what I had read, because I didn't know the World Bank. By some accident, I would say, I managed to get into the World Bank and then discover that the World Bank actually works on things like governance. And although the truth is that it was new for the World Bank too at the time. So then I realized, oh, this is not what I thought it was. I thought it was, neoliberal, anti-people, like the kind of criticism that we rightly received in the 80s and up to certain points in the 90s, perhaps. And I had that image, and then I learned that it's actually not that simple. And it's very diverse. It's very intellectually stimulating. So somebody who thought, he would be a university professor found an internal organization environment where debates are going on all the time, seminars are happening all the time, the prominent academics coming in and giving lectures, or World Bank people doing their own research work, sharing their work in progress. So it was a very vibrant intellectual environment on the one hand. And then this opportunity that we have to work across the globe. So this is my 5th country office.
5th country.
In 26 years in the World Bank. Our headquarters is in Washington, D.C., so most of the time we're in Washington, D.C.
Indeed.
But, if you want, like I have been prone to, you can look for assignments in the country. And so I did Kenya, Brazil, Philippines, Afghanistan, and here I am.
Wow, yeah.
And I don't know how many jobs there are out there that allows you to have this kind of experience.
Exposure as well, right?
So, one thing led to another. I've been having fun all these years and haven't thought about leaving. But so thought has crossed my mind and to think, okay, what would it be like to work for somebody else and so on? But, in the end, I've stayed. Yeah.
So what is the most interesting things that you have ever experienced during your time in the World Bank?
I would say, I cannot say one thing.
Okay.
There have been many rewarding moments, but the most memorable ones are, one is Nepal.
Nepal?
I was leading the social protection team, and we responded to the earthquake in 2015.
Okay.
There was this big earthquake in Nepal in 2015. 8,000, 10,000 people perished. And in one of their provinces, they call it district, 99% of the housing was destroyed. Basically, all the houses went down because of the earthquake. And it was a huge disaster. And I was one of the first people to arrive from Washington and start, putting together a plan for the World Bank's response. So that was interesting. It's not the typical way in which the World Bank operates, but we do these things too. Disaster response. And because we're the World Bank, we contribute to something like, economic estimates of the damage, for example, and then, devise response plans working with the government. And if the government requests it, we can provide financing for reconstruction projects. So, we worked on that all summer in 2015. So that was one memorable moment. And the other one was my 3 years in Afghanistan.
I'm sure. Yeah. During the Afghanistan war, I suppose, no?
Just before the Taliban came back in 2020.
Oh no. Yeah. How was the experience?
So people always say, oh, how did you do that? And it was...
Wasn't it dangerous for you?
Objectively speaking, yes, a little bit. But we never felt, I never felt threatened. It's just maybe a personality thing, but it was, in India, we didn't accomplish it, because what happened in Afghanistan, for the listeners who may not be familiar, because looking at your age, right, maybe...
Because we don't know what is happening out there, but you used to be there.
So yesterday, 9/11, right, September 11th in 2001, there was this big terrorist attacks in New York, and then, thousands of American people, died in it, and then U.S. government declared a war on terror, right? And the U.S. government invaded Afghanistan, kicked out the Taliban, who were governing Afghanistan, but also harboring Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group that planned this terrorist attack and planned and executed this terrorist attack. So after the Taliban were removed, all the donors came back in, including the World Bank, and started helping Afghanistan reconstruct society in a more modern Western kind of way. We were financing reconstruction of schools. We were financing the running of the entire public health system in the country.
Right.
And doing it in a way that continuously improved the quality of the services delivered. And, we were doing all kinds of things, but we ran out of time. And in my assessment, we may never have achieved it because the fundamental governance of the country was not strong enough. But in the best case scenario, we probably would have needed another 10, 20 years, for Afghanistan to be able to stand on its own.
Right.
We were not given the 10, 20 years. We had to leave. But while it lasted, feeling like, in the big long run scheme of things, thinking that we might be a small piece of that progress of historic proportion, was very rewarding, but also many, many frustrating moments because it's a difficult environment. So, most things do not go the way you imagine. It was a constant battle between the plan and the vision and the strategy and the realities on the ground.
Wow. How did you leave Afghanistan? Do you follow the US plane or you just left before?
What happened in our case is that the COVID happened.
Okay.
And we evacuated from the country office because the health system was very weak and all the borders closed. So we had the risk of being stuck in Afghanistan for who knows how long. Kabul, yeah. So before that happened, we were told by our management to evacuate. And so I left on the very last flight from Dubai to the US. After that, for a while, no flight,
no more,
operated between Dubai and the US.
What
of course, between Afghanistan and Dubai, nothing, with borders closed all around. Yeah.
Right, what an experience, man. I could have never imagined such an image.
Yeah.
But it is very risky, sir. I have my respect for you because
in hindsight, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Our plan was to keep like 3 or 4 people on the ground.
But luckily all evacuated.
So I volunteered to stay,
Wow.
And then I'm glad that our vice president called me and said, okay, no, you better get out.
You are a brave man, sir.
Otherwise, I would have been stuck there for a very long time.
Okay. Yeah. Right, coming to the end of the programs, I just want to ask for your opinions. Is there anything that you want to say to our audience, especially those young people who are working or studying disciplines like yours, political science, development studies, or international relations, right? So they might be curious about their future careers prospects, especially for Malaysians graduates. So what are the words that you hope to share with them?
What I sense is that young people in Malaysia care about Malaysia, and young people in Malaysia like Malaysia for all the right reasons, I think. And I sense a level of frustration, with the way some of the things are going. But I don't know how you do that. But, the key is not to lose hope and give up on the country or sort of look at it as, okay, I have the option of working in Singapore, so that's no longer my problem. The more people adopt that attitude, the less chance the country will have of achieving the aspiration. So having these discussions, I think, is important. It's also a relatively young democracy, right? So speaking as a former political scientist, a bit academically, young democracy takes long time to mature, right? It can also fall, so. Malaysia has been independent for what, 65 years or something like that?
66 years?
Yeah. So, it's not a very long time. And if you give up on it, institutions can fall apart and the democracy can be lost. I feel like Malaysian political system is in a sort of maybe approaching a crossroad,
Approaching a crossroad.
Yeah, and it can come out in a very good place. If you manage to do it. So engagement, I think, is the key. And you can do this from any walk of life. You don't need to study political science to do these things, right?
Right.
So there I have hope. I sense the frustration and the desire among some of the people to leave the country and explore their future elsewhere. But I think, there are enough people who care about the country and then stick around. I sense that a lot more than, say, my own country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Than Japan.
Yeah, it's not good to compare places, you know,
yeah.
but I think I can do it, you know, at least with my country. There's a lot more apathy in Japan, and that's the enemy, apathy.
Right.
If you fight that, if you find a way to fight that, I think you'll be fine.
Wow. Deep words.
Well,
right. So the last question, how do you see Malaysia in the future, in your own assessment? Or what's your hope for the country?
So I think Malaysia will become, I know that Malaysia will become a high-income economy and will continue to grow. You know, whether it will reach the level of today's Europe or Singapore and so on, that at the current pace, that would take a while, right? But the country as a whole, I think, is going to be okay, I think. A big challenge is inequality. So the country may reach the high income status, but a lot of people will not. And a lot of the places will not. You know, I'm wearing a batik from Kelantan. It would take Kelantan 30 years of 5% growth to reach the high income threshold. Kelantan has never grown at 5%, never, right? So you need something miracle to bring Kelantan and, you know, Perlis and so on up to the level of Selangor and Penang and so on. That's, I think, a key task. You do that, then I think, you know, Malaysia will be a, you know, reasonably comfortable high-income economy. Maybe not at the level of Singapore or you know, Sweden, you know, but still, you know, nice and livable place. And there are so many other good qualities to Malaysian society that, you know, people will stay and enjoy their lives here.
Right. So that's the end of the program. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's our absolute pleasure to have you on my YouTube channel. Thank you for accepting my small YouTube channel.
Okay, no, thank you.
So here's come to the end of the program, and thank you everyone for watching this program. 谢谢大家观看今天的节目，也相信经过 Mr. Yasu 的介绍呢，大家能够更加认识世界银行在马来西亚的作为，还有 Mr. Yasu 本身的经历也非常的精彩。我们再次感谢他 ，Thank you, Mr. Yasu, and thank you everyone. 我们下期再会，拜拜。